Alright, so we're going to take our GreenTron deck out for a run at this point. This is the first game we play, opening hand. It's okay. I think what this deck really makes up for with lack of draw is the fact that it can really compensate on the acceleration if it does not have, the Tron base together. So you see here we have no single part of our Tron mana base, but we can get out a turn 1 expedition map for a later search. We can also manage a turn 2 battlement into turn 3 Wall of Roots, and then when we get that Wall of Roots in turn 3, we finally lost Summoning Sickness on the battlement, which we'll be able to tap for 2 mana. So there's some plays out there. Probably what we're going to see here is that, we'll ramp up into this and we'll be able to get this Crusher going, despite the fact that you may not necessarily get your Tron base online as fast as you probably want to. So we are going to play Slivers. This is something I think we have an okay time against because of the fact that we are running some of these walls. That gives us decent blockers in the early game to prevent some of the early fast damage that it can put out there. I'm really going to kind of depend on the draw for our opponent and what he gets as far as pump spells. There are very few of them in most Sliver decks, but where they count is the fact that they can pump multiple creatures. We'll also find that Wall of Roots becomes a little less powerful the more we use it. In stopping those early game creatures, we have to watch out for flanking. And kind of an interesting list because he was running Gemhide Sliver, something that is usually not done in current Sliver decks. But there's the flanking on the Sidewinder. That's something we have to look out for. Also, if we start using the Overgrown Battlement to compensate for our lack of Tron, we are tapping it out and it's not going to be able to block. Now, it's good because you have all these walls and you can start compensating against that extra damage in the early game. Where it starts to decline in power is the fact that you don't have spot removal. So you can block till the point where he has, say, 3 lords on the battlefield, and then the Slivers will already be at least 4 power and easily able to get through the 4 defense under walls, and they're no longer effective. So it's going to be hit or miss. We kind of want to get this Crusher onto the field as soon as we possibly can, just so that we can have something to start eating through his permanents. I'm going to go with Tower first here just because it is the largest mana producer of the Tron lands and use it to put out a map instead of taking a counter off Wall of Roots. That keeps the toughness high. So we see our first Lord hit the table here, and again, the more Lords that enter, the stronger they will be, obviously, and once they reach that 4 toughness, it's going to be difficult for us to handle. Motorcycle going by, sorry about that. Another wall is decent play here because we can use it to get more mana off of our battlement. Going to find yet another piece of our Tron engine and put it into place so that we do have a blocker to help us cut through some of these Slivers. Again, not going to be able to actually take them off the table. We're just kind of delaying in a similar way that Glimmer Post does. So that goes down. Also putting down Fierce Empath, that's going to be something to easily block. And it's kind of interesting here. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to fetch out. We do already have an Olamog's Crusher in hand. We already have an Aurochs Herd. Finding another Aurochs Herd, not as effective because it acts as its own tutor. Most of the time you want to use these Empaths for something else. Our options basically come down to the Marauder. There's no real benefit for it. To gain a significant amount of life. These aren't actually artifacts, they're just colorless. So you can't really gain anything unless you're sacrificing your own thing. We've already got 2 maps in the graveyard. You have the Tusker, which is just, again, mediocre. And, you're probably not going to want to cycle it for land, especially when we have these walls here. And your other creature here, the Sentinel Spider, is actually not big enough to be found, so... Just going with the other Crusher here, I figure at the worst case I can start getting 2 of them on the table once I get the mana up. And it should be this turn. You see 4 here. The wall taps for another 3, and then we'll use a counter off of the Wall of Roots and we can get down our first Crusher. And if we can put out a Crusher per turn, we start eating through those permanents, we'll be in a pretty good position. Going to attack through here, that's fine. Going to be able to think we're chump blocking on some of these. No, we have to sacrifice off the Empath, just trying to keep the damage down. Once they start getting the swarm going, things get really nasty. And again, it comes down to what he draws and what non-creature spells he is running. Oddly enough, he is running Fortified. That's something we haven't seen as much of, but works really great, actually, in this deck. because he's going to be able to take out the wall, he's going to be able to take out the empath, and he's going to be able to do a significant amount of damage to us. And when he takes out that wall and the empath, empath is not that great. Taking out the wall is going to do enough to reduce the mana that we get off the battlement, and now we can no longer cast our Ulamog's Crushers, and this is game over. So that was, a great draw from my opponent, a great play, I guess, in choosing to run that over some of the single-targeted skills. I think Slivers players should keep that in mind. I think there's a lot more benefit to stuff like Fortify that pumps your entire lineup, especially when you're running these kind of weenie horde strategies. So we're just going to take this. I think the deck actually had a solid chance against Slivers. Obviously, if you went to sideboarding from here, you would be looking into fog effects, and this would be, I think, still a pretty solid matchup in favor of Green Post. But unfortunately, our opponent got a better draw than we did this time around. Alright, so moving to our second game with Green Post, opening hand looks pretty good. I mean, we have 2 lands available to us, 1 piece of Tron and a colored land, which is always nice. Turn 1 Expedition Map, turn 2 Prisms available. Double Auroch Herd is okay. Again, those are kind of nicer to have in your deck and searching them out instead of in your hand. It works a little bit better when it operates that way, but we're not going to complain at all. We have some big creatures and some ways to accelerate our mana base. So going to get that turn 1 map. Guildgate is going to come down. We're going to take this chance to pop this right away. Really doesn't matter. I mean, I guess being technical at the end of your opponent's turn is the correct time to play that. But we're going to find Tower, which is the biggest mana producer. So Ponder's going down. At this point in time, I am assuming that it is eye candy. When you see, obviously, blue and red, unless you see, currently, unless I see a Cloud Post go down, which is possible because, testing this out before the ban goes into effect. But after the ban goes into effect, when you see red and blue, most of the time it is going to be eye candy. So my thought is to try and get a blocker down early. I think it could actually be a really terrible matchup depending on your opponent's hand. I think now, hindsight being what it is, if my opponent had been a little more aggressive in his mulligan, this might have gone a little bit differently. But again, hindsight. I think it's a pretty terrible match because we can create a whole bunch of chump blockers in our walls and stuff, but one of the things that Eye Candy does best is create evasion through giving creatures shadow and the ability to go unblockable. So decided I want to get Prism down here. Acid Moss, this is kind of where I'm talking about. At this point in time, he's only got 1 red source, so if he plays another blue, I'm golden. I want to use that to target down the Guildgate and try and remove red. Without the red, he can't play the Kiln Fiend and he cannot play Cyclops. Unfortunately, he does hit another red, so it doesn't hurt as much, but we're still going to do it. It's going to ramp our mana out here. Taking out the Guildgate reduces his double in both colors. So we put that on the field, passing along the turn. It actually turned out that he was not running Eye Candy and instead is just running an Izzet Control, which is something that we have seen in the past. Some others have spectated that it could become a thing now that Izzet Post is gone. That there might be room for a just red-blue control. That's kind of the only reason I'm leaving it in here. Most of the time, when I do these replays, I prefer to do it this way, so if someone comes along with something non-competitive, which is possible in the tournament practice room, that, I can avoid the video, not waste your time, not waste my time. And if we get a game, that's just horribly terrible, doesn't show anything, opponent just concedes, then I don't waste your time with it. So the fact that there is some speculation, and I think it's absolutely possible for blue-red, counterburn to be a thing later on, even if it is a rogue strategy. And so I wanted to keep this in here, but going to tap out here, trying to draw some cards off our Prism, putting down the Empath so we can finally get our Crusher. We're finally starting to approach the mana base that we need. You see we got 6 on the field, even though our Tron is not online. We'll have 7 next turn, and we'll at least get that Crusher out eventually. Can start playing the Auroch Herds at these points, and do have, again, more Empaths, which we could absolutely use if we so desired to find... we're sitting here at 7 land. We could use an Empath to find our Tusker, to find that land number 8 so we can get our Crusher going. But I kind of wanted to get these herds into play, at least have some kind of creature base that he has to start worrying about. These things are going to be, since he is kind of is it control. It's going to be something that's harder for him to deal with unless he is running Flame Slash, which most do not. So down comes Pestermite. Oddly enough, chooses to tap the mine. It's kind of an interesting play. I think he was just trying to get it down. You'll see here in a second he is going to swap this out for a Ninja and draw cards there. So he really didn't have a play that was necessary off of the Pestermite. Does play a land, so we know that he has that open, and probably at the beginning of our combat he's most likely to play that, trying to tap out the aura cards and keeping it from attacking. We will at least have some options to chump block the Ninja next time around. He does manage to get, that one Ninja in, thanks to the fact that Pestermite has flying. But it's going to be much weaker against us, as we have plenty of chump blockers in hand, and even just one Fierce Empath on the field is going to do enough to keep it from drawing cards. So finally hit our 8 mana necessary for playing Olmog's Crusher. Unfortunately for us, it's turn 7, so we didn't ramp the way we should have. Something that I think Tron decks will have to get used to. It's much harder to put the Tron base online than it is an 8-post. But we're going to tap out anyways. We're going to get that Crusher down, see what goes on. He is going to do what damage he apparently can through the air. And pass along the turn. And now we have plenty of opportunity. Finally find our last part of the Tron mana base. With 2 prisms and 3 forests, we have plenty of room here. We can use empaths to find another Crusher. We can use aura cards to find the remaining aura cards. Beginning of combat, he is going to play another Pestermite to tap out that Crusher. But that works for us. We're going to simply swing through with this aura card and do 4 damage if he chooses not to block. And again, plenty of options here. I did decide I wanted another Crusher on the field, or at least attempt to. He's going to counterspell this, but I think I did the math and realized I can still get that on the field thanks to having 3 of the towers on the field. That's going to give us plenty of mana to recast a Empath and put out the Crusher. So now you're a pretty bad state, when you're an opponent in this situation. Sitting across from 1 Olmog's Crusher is okay. You can stall for time until you find something to deal with it. Sitting across from 2 is an incredibly bad position to be in, because even if you can jump block those 2 and prevent the 16 damage, they are going to force you to sacrifice a total of 4 permanents. So that is game over, and our opponent does decide to concede. So an interesting game there. Shows a decent amount of acceleration. Once you have it online, what you can really start doing, with a seemingly small creature base. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and we're going to move on to the next one here in just a minute.